Hello, this is the Astrofiend. Welcome. I thought I'll do something a bit different, and as you can see from the title, I want to be talking about Octavia E. Butler. It's her birthday today, and I just want to talk about her natal chart and her astrology. And just like it being Cancer season is also the perfect person to talk about. All this information is on my blog, by the way. So today would have been Octavia E. Butler's 73rd birthday. Octavia E. Butler was a science fiction writer who was the first science fiction writer to win the prestigious MacArthur, nicknamed Genius Grant Fellowship Award. She was also recipient of both the Hugo and Nebula Awards, winning 2 each. I first heard about her when I was about 13 years old. Since then, I've read a couple of more books, including Parable of the Sower, Parable of the Talents, Kindred Wildseed, Pattern Master. By the way, I recommend you read her books. She was born today, obviously, on June 22nd, 1947, in Pasadena, California. Octavia Butler was an only child. She was raised primarily by her grandmother and her widowed mother, who worked as a maid in the 1950s and 60s. Octavia was a shy, awkward kid with a slight dyslexia that was bullied. Her mother encouraged her to pursue an education because she couldn't. This led to Octavia E. Butler to get into reading, science fiction, and writing. She retreated into writing science fiction, making up stories, and doing her own thing. From my research, Octavia E. Butler possesses a quiet confidence and a profound singular ambition. Octavia knew she would be a science fiction writer and manifested her dream and therefore her destiny. She paved the way for many Black women science fiction writers and Afrofuturist writers and artists who imagine a destiny and a future where Black people are in charge of their being. Octavia E. Butler died in 2006 of possible complications of a stroke related to a fall in her home in Washington State. Now let's get into her astrology. I'm going to post her astrology chart from Astro Charts in the video, and there's pretty much what you see here, and let's get into it. So first, Octavia is a Sun in Cancer conjunct Uranus and Gemini in the 12th house. Her perfectly chart seeping with astrocentricity will make a believer out of an astrology skeptic. Describing herself as shy, timid, reclusive, introspective, it's perfect that she'll be a Sun in Cancer in the 12th house. The 12th house is many things. The house of undoing, self-undoing, of prisons, hospitals, etc. The 12th house is ruled by Pisces, aka Neptune/Poseidon. The second house is a spiritual death cycle where the borders and veil between dimensions are thin. It's pretty much like a Halloween funhouse 24/7. Octavia is a hermit crab in a beach overlooking a cosmic ocean in another dimension. That's how I'll describe it. Random, but it's possible in her lifetime Octavia was a masterful channeler, whether she was aware of it or not. Energy can't be destroyed or transferred, so it's probable that she was an empath and a channeler, and she probably was reclusive and introspective and retreated into herself to protect herself from the world and all its bullshit. Not only was she a Cancer Sun in the 12th house, she was also Sun in Cancer conjunct Uranus and Gemini in the 12th house. She was fiercely a hermit escapist, but at the same time very individualistic, quietly rebellious, and social communicator via her Gemini mercurial energy. This energy also heightens and intensifies the energy of her 12th chart her 12th house, excuse me. This gives her flashes of insight, possible psychic abilities, honestly. And as a writer, Octavia is very self-aware of who she is. You know, it's crazy to see that Octavia is celebrated as a black feminist woman, possibly queer Afrofuturist writer, when it's quite a contradiction as to how Octavia wanted to be seen. If you see any of her interviews, it's clear that she didn't want to be boxed into the black female science fiction writer role. Like, literally, just like watch the interview she did with Charlie Rose and his annoying, interrupting, non-listening ass. Octavia didn't care about the semantics or social optics. She didn't even consider herself a science fiction writer, but a writer. Writing was her identity, and she created and birthed herself like a strange alien organic organism that's both its mother and father. She had escaped these tendencies, but she never ran away from herself. She ran away from others in her own and their own labels of her. However, she knew that she was a black woman, and she was proud of that. She just didn't want the media to put her in her double minority category. That's like very limiting and insulting to her talent and artistry. This quote that she used to describe herself pretty much sums up her 12th house and sun energy. I'm comfortably asocial, a hermit in the middle of a large city, a pessimist if I'm not careful, a feminist, a black, a former Baptist, an oil and water combination of ambition, laziness, insecurity, certainty, and drive. She knew herself, damn. Anyways, to get into her Mars in Taurus, Venus / North Node in Gemini in the 12th house. I'm also inserting a picture of her, a screenshot of her house placements from AstroChart. So Octavia didn't need to socialize, in my opinion, in this traditional sense. Looking at her natal chart, she socialized through her writing and communicating her ideas. Venus in Gemini perfectly illustrates that, especially in the 12th house. The 12th house is all about public associations, group power, and the social groups you're active in. The sci-fi community was her tribe. It was her clan. Her Mars in Taurus is also in the 12th house. Mars is a lot of things, and in this case, this is her ambition. She is so passionate about writing and participating in these groups. Mars in Taurus is focused, patient, hard worker that is very grounded and willing to work. The way she uses her Mars in Taurus contradicts traditional Mars in Taurus themes: earthy, sensual, slightly hedonistic, and if you want to focus on Mars sexuality, in her books there's a slightly otherworldly sexual element: alien, human sex, mating, breeding, vampire human sex. And I would say a lot of her books treat sex as impersonal and not used necessarily for pleasure. It's like a side effect, kind of. It's more like utility, reproduction purposes for human survival. And you could see that example in her book Dawn. And I mean, she does dive into sort of romantic sort of situation, but that's not the main focus. That's what I'm saying. The pleasure in sex, in her writing, and in her characters' stories. I mean, there are a couple of exceptions, like Parable of the Sower, where it's kind of romantic, and Wild Seed and Kindred, which is not necessarily romantic, but it's violent and it's used for control. And Lastly, her North Node is in Gemini in the 11th house. This means her destiny is tied with others and the world. Like, why is it now that she's been dead for over 10 years and artists like Janelle Monáe are highly influenced by her work? I mean, it makes sense why. Like, she's obviously talented, she's obviously very creative and inspirational, but like, you hear more about her like kind of more now than like, well, maybe, I don't know, I wasn't around during that time like that, so I don't know, but I just feel like she's like getting her like props now. But random, but like about a year or so ago on Instagram, I read that one of her books, Dawn, is being developed into an Amazon series by the director Ava DuVernay. And I also learned that another one of her books, Wild Seed, is being adapted by actress Viola Davis for another Amazon series. So like, she's very relevant now, possibly even more so now than back then. She's literally getting her flowers and the respect and recognition that she deserved. Like, she got it during her time, but she's getting it like on a different level now, if that makes any sense. Okay, next is her Neptune and Libra in the 3rd house. And just to give you a little quote, and I'm also going to insert that into the video. Every story I created creates me. I write to create myself, which is like very like, it's like very self-reflective, and I think this like applies to her Neptune and Libra in the 3rd house. And that's like, she's like a sci-fi like writer, like that's so Neptune in the 3rd house. And again, I have to repeat what I just like said not too long ago, but she had escapist like tendencies, but she literally never ran away from herself. She just ran away from others and their labels of her. And like, she was proud to be black, and the characters in her books are black, but again, like, the media is like a messy ass hoe, and you know, they just wanted to put her in a category, and I feel that she wasn't comfortable with that, which is why she tried to distance herself from like the labels. That's why she considers herself a writer and not just like a science fiction writer. But yeah, like, she's the myth and the reality. Like, Neptune in the 3rd house in Libra, like, she created herself. She birthed herself. She birthed herself using her mind. Like, pretty much I feel that your mind, your words, your thoughts, and the self-talk are important for creating your own identity. And I feel that she knew the importance of that. That's why she took control of her identity and didn't want to be like put into boxes. And I feel like she realized at some point that there were no boundaries for her, and that she could be anything and whomever she wanted when she wrote. And her Neptune in Libra in the 3rd house is very socially aware. Her novels have a lot of socially aware themes, such as global warming / climate change, humanity, like, and like just like humanity in general, like escapism, racism, classism. And she just used her otherworldly words and boundless creativity to like create new worlds in her writing. And I feel like maybe escape isn't necessarily a right word for her, but maybe like transcend, maybe that's a better word. But I also want to get into her Jupiter in Scorpio retrograde in the 5th house. And Jupiter and Scorpio in retrograde in the 5th house, and as you know, like, The fifth house is creativity, sex, children, romance. And I feel not only was she her own mother and father, when it comes to writing, by the way, not like actually, like obviously, but yeah. Not only was she her own mother and father, but she was also her child, if that makes any sense. Like, and to quote like the divine Venus, Jupiter in retrograde can act like Pluto in a sense that the energy is directed inward and can be very transformational. Technically, you don't really have any choice about transforming because the energy is like directed inward, and I totally agree with that. And Octavia, with Jupiter in Scorpio retrograde in the fifth house, she had a very expensive creative world that she built in her novels that portray themes that are very like unique and foreign in terms of sexuality and expression of that sexuality, reproduction, power dynamics, and overall an interesting world full of chaos and like new possibilities. And Octavia was like an extremist, militant, and very obsessed when it came to her writing. And to reference an article that I pulled up, it stated that this is a quote from like the article that Octavia described of like her writing and like her like being obsessed. To quote, possessive obsession for science fiction writing. She refers to this concept in an autobiographical essay, saying that positive obsession is not about not being able to stop just because you're afraid and full of doubts. Positive obsession is dangerous. It's about not being able to stop at all. I've also seen quotes from her where she talks about if she wasn't writing, she'll be dead. That's like very like extreme, but it makes sense because from my opinion and my perspective, Jupiter in like Scorpio especially and retrograde and in the fifth house is like very like intense. And yeah, I could definitely see that. And I feel like she just had a mission. Like she had like a divine, unstoppable mission to humanity, like one of her fantastical characters in her book. Moving on, Moon and Leo in the second house. And Moon and Leo in the second house is where I think Octavia got her quiet confidence. I honestly think it's a misconception that Moon and Leo are attention whores. I notice Moon and Leos, for the most part, tend to be very reserved emotionally. That doesn't mean that like Octavia or any like other Moon and Leo wasn't bursting with like theatrical dramatic creativity and like emotions and all that other crap via like emotions. And honestly, I feel that she shares a lot of similarities astrologically and like life themes wise with Frida Kahlo. Like these are both women who created themselves in their own image, who had this rich creative inner world that informed their daily existence. Octavia had Moon in the second house too, so not only was her Moon in Leo but also in the second house. So she was using her emotions and habits to literally make money. And Moon in the second house I feel is very instinctual and has like income that fluctuates a lot. And honestly, nothing is more inconsistent than the life of a professional artist, like a writer, and that's what she was. And Octavia, I feel, stick to what she knew, which was herself and what she wanted to put out there. And that's what led to her career and like how she got like her bag. Not only that, but she also has Mercury in Cancer, Saturn in Leo, and Pluto in Leo in the first house. So she had a lot of planets in the first house. So it's pretty much her, like, the first house could be like her outlook on life. Like, random, not to go off on a like tangent, but I feel that the first house is like, people like to say, oh, the first house is not important, and it's just a mask that you just wear out to the world and all that other crap. Like, no, I think it's like, I mean, it can be, but it's not like just that. And I think it's a very like simple like definition. I feel that it's more than a mask. It's like literally like how you navigate the world. It's how you put yourself out there. Like, I mean, it's pretty obvious if you like do like a whole bunch of like reading on like the first house and stuff like that. But I don't think it's something you just like take off like a mask. It's something that you carry. It's like what like kind of motivates you, that gets you going. And I feel with her, like her instinctive emotional nature, aka her Mercury in Cancer, like fuels her work. She couldn't stop. Her work was her life, her mission, her legacy. Again, she birthed herself, which is a very motherly, like Cancerian, Cancer moon sort of thing. She nurtured and developed her creativity, and in doing so, she created her life and the life of her worlds. She also was her own father, which is like the Saturn and Leo energy in her chart. And you know, like in astrology, Leo is the sun, but the father. Little like pun there. But like there's like different like sort of like planets that are assigned as like the quote unquote father archetype. Like Saturn is kind of like the father, but like a sort of strict father, and could be seen as also the grandfather. But the planet, well, the luminary, the sun, like it could be also seen as a father too, since it also like operates in a way like the opposite of the moon, which is also a luminary in astrology. And pretty much she loved herself, aka Leo, aka the Cancer energy. She loved herself enough to discipline herself, which is Saturn in Leo. She disciplined her creativity. She like controlled it and her creative talent, and that became her power, which is Pluto. And random, but in terms of appearance, Octavia stood at 6 feet tall, so she was literally made to like stand out. And that's like Pluto in the first house energy, like completely. And to note, her ascendant is also in Cancer, so she was literally a gentle giant, and she had a stellium in Cancer, and a stellium in Leo, and I think a stellium in Gemini. Like her, like it's very like interesting, her chart. And Octavia is like a very important figure, and her astrological chart, her natal chart, is very like cohesive. It makes a lot of sense. And honestly, there's more I can say about her natal chart, but I'll stop here and I'll just say happy birthday, Octavia Butler. Bye.